Tonight, taxing times for the Prime Minister. Anthony Albanese defends his redesign of Stage 3 tax cuts. Also tonight, methamphetamine with a street value of $55 million seized on its way to Canberra. Cyclone Kir strengthens to a Category 3 system as it barrels towards the Queensland coast. And Australia makes a strong start in the second test against the West Indies at the Gabba. Yuma, good evening. Adrienne Francis with ABC News, coming to you from Ngunnawal country. And we also acknowledge other people and families with connection to the lands of the ACT. Anthony Albanese has abandoned key elements of massive tax cuts his government's repeatedly supported since it came to power, instead redirecting them towards millions of workers on low and middle incomes. The Prime Minister's acknowledged the backflip will be controversial, but insists Australians need financial relief. It's already triggered a furious backlash from the opposition leader, who's accused Mr Albanese of inflicting an unforgivable lie on voters. Here's political reporter Matthew Doran.
In a hurry to begin the public sales pitch,
you guys get out of the way.
After upending a 5-year-old tax plan he'd inherited and had committed to keeping, just 5 months before it was due to come into force.
When economic circumstances change, the right thing to do is to change economic policy.
We're seeing a political charlatan who's prepared to do or say anything.
The original cuts passed back in 2019 would have left the tax system looking like this from the 1st of July this year. The main change was the removal of an entire tax bracket, meaning everyone earning between $45,000 and $200,000 a year would pay the same rate of tax. Labor's proposal shoves that extra tax bracket back in and it tinkers with the rates and thresholds around it. The lowest rate of tax is cut from 19% to 16%. The second tax rate sits at 30%. The 37% tax rate is the one that's reappeared, but it kicks in at a higher income level than before, of $135,000 a year, and the top tax rate from $190,000 a year. But how that translates to your bank account is the key here. Before, low-income earners weren't going to see anything from the Coalition's Stage 3 tax cuts. Under Labor's proposal, they'll get an extra $800. More cash will continue through those middle income ranges up until $150,000 a year when the tide turns. The tax cuts are still there, they're just not as large for higher income earners as they otherwise would have been.
It's great for the lower income people because obviously you get more back, but at the same time, the higher income, I mean, they worked for their money, so why should they be penalised?
To use arguments like, oh, things have changed, is spurious.
Peter Dutton not commenting today on whether he'd repeal the plan if he became Prime Minister, rather wanting to focus on matters of character and credibility for the current PM.
Look at what he says and contrast that with what he actually does, because he's not a truthful person.
I'll tell you what my integrity is. Not looking at low and middle income earners and saying, sorry, I'm just the Prime Minister, I'm not in a position to help you.
The policy pivot will be put to its first electoral test in just over a month, when voters in the outer Melbourne seat of Dunkley go to the polls in a by-election.
I think it's good as long as inflation doesn't go up.
That's great for me and for my family.
But on whether it's a broken promise.
More like a reality check.
The government always changes their mind all the time. I don't really trust what they say regardless, sorry.
The Prime Minister citing Treasury analysis to insist that giving more people more money won't drive inflation even higher.
See you later.
And he's not done yet, promising more cost of living relief in the May budget, while setting the consumer watchdog on the nation's supermarkets to investigate whether customers are being gouged at the checkout. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Canberra.
100 kilograms of methamphetamine has been seized by ACT Police and the Australian Border Force in the capital's largest ever meth bust. Police say the drugs seized had an estimated street value of $55 million, representing more than 1 million individual hits. The drugs were intercepted in New South Wales in November by Border Force officers, allegedly hidden in a consignment from the US, addressed to a business in Fyshwick. No arrests have yet been made and investigations are continuing. ACT Police say the drugs were found in a shipment of car parts.
Well, there were 3 pallets of car radiators, Drugs were concealed in in a number of radiators within that larger consignment.
Health officials say people who may have been exposed to a measles case in the Territory are being notified. ACT Health says the person is believed to have acquired the disease while travelling overseas. They arrived at Sydney Airport on Saturday morning and travelled to Canberra on a Murray's bus that day. The person then attended the emergency department at the Canberra Hospital on Sunday afternoon. The Chief Health Officer says the risk to the community is low, but is urging people to check their vaccination status.
We are aware of 2 specific locations and periods of time where people were potentially exposed to the measles case, and we are contacting those individuals at this point in time. So we've been doing that yesterday and are working through that today as well, and they'll be provided with the specific information that they need.
North Queenslanders are tonight taking shelter as they brace for the full impact of severe tropical cyclone Kir. The latest forecast has the Category 3 system making landfall just north of Townsville around 10 p.m. But the damage is expected to be more widespread as gale force winds batter coastal communities from Innisfail to Mackay.
A raging sea off the North Queensland coast. It's a treacherous playground for adventure seekers, the early symptoms of a looming cyclone.
We can come out about 7:30 this morning for a quick kite, get in well before it gets too windy.
Kir is on a rampage, at her core 165 km/h gusts. Hamilton Islands copped 115 an hour winds, and heavy rain brought early flooding in downtown Bowen.
We could see isolated totals of up to 300 millimetres in a 24-hour period as this system crosses the coast.
Elders have been flown off Palm Island, which doesn't have an evacuation centre.
We're the largest discrete Indigenous community with a large population, and we do need one.
The system is due to hit Townsville and surrounds late tonight.
We've distributed more than 20,000 sandbags at the moment.
This afternoon, residents were ordered to seek shelter and lock down.
We're prepared and ready for the worst. Now we wait and hope for the best.
Along the coast, communities spent the day counting down and getting ready. Townsville's most vulnerable have also taken shelter in evacuation centres. It's the barest of basics. Residents and visitors on Magnetic Island, just off the coast of Townsville, have been cut off from the mainland. They've been urged to have enough boiled drinking water to last them 3 days in case of power failures. Across the region, more than 100 schools are closed. In air, locals spent the day preparing, and teams of volunteers have been busy filling sandbags.
It's been outstanding actually for the last 4 or 5 days. You can see by the people here, this has just been non-stop for that whole time.
Some residents have boarded up their homes, just like they've done in previous cyclones.
Oh, I've been set up from the last few, and all we do is put the timber back over windows so we don't break the windows.
Extra police and emergency crews have been deployed. Interstate help is also on its way. A sleepless night ahead. Lily Nothling, ABC News, Townsville.
Over the past 2 years, floods have ravaged the low-lying areas of Australia, breaking riverbanks and inundating homes. New figures show more than 6,000 Australians are still waiting for their insurers to pay out as the industry grapples with one disaster after another. It's left many living in precarious accommodation until their claims are resolved.
Shelley Sybaris is living in a caravan after her home was destroyed by floods in 2022.
I came home and, devastating. Just absolutely devastating. That was the initial quote.
Adding to her trauma, dealing with her insurer, who claimed some damage was pre-existing, it offered her less than half her insured amount.
I've dealt with RACV for 30 years, never had a problem. I don't know why they're doing this to us.
New figures show 6,500 out of 160,000 house insurance claims from the major 4 floods of the past 2 years are still outstanding. A federal parliamentary inquiry is looking at insurers' response to recent floods.
The insurance system is broken and it needs urgent reform.
Financial counsellors say they're hearing from new clients daily who need insurance help.
They are coming in with issues like delays, claim denials, problems with strip outs of their properties, problems with accessing trades and supply of goods, and also issues with temporary accommodation.
Insurers say they're dealing with a perfect storm of events as natural disasters become more intense.
We're seeing a challenge in getting builders, finding temporary accommodation for people who can't live in their homes is also a challenge. It was inevitable that we would have some claims that didn't work perfectly.
Following the ABC's inquiries, RACV settled with Shelley. People are urged to raise complaints with their insurer and the regulator. Alison Branley, ABC News.
2 Melbourne statues have been vandalised on the eve of Australia Day. In St Kilda, a statue of Captain Cook has been sawn off at the ankles. Police say the vandalism was reported by members of the public in the early hours of this morning. Closer to the CBD, a monument in Queen Victoria Gardens was splashed with red paint. Workers were on site today cleaning it. Police say both acts of vandalism are being investigated. Canberrans are being invited to gather around Lake Burley Griffin after dark this long weekend for a bit of a light entertainment. At dusk for the next 3 nights, 600 illuminated drones, each weighing just 350 grams, will take to the skies. The Australian first sky show, called Flight, is an alternative to a traditional fireworks display. Instead, the choreographed drone display will be encouraging spectators to reflect, respect and celebrate our shared history. The event features the Ngunnawal totem, Mullion, the wedge-tailed eagle, representing 65,000 years of continuous culture. Crowds are gathering at the National Arboretum here in Canberra for the 2024 Australian of the Year Awards. Reporter Evelyn Manfield joins me now from outside the ceremony. Evelyn, many Australians are being honoured tonight.
The red carpet's a little quiet now, but it was really palpable with excitement just before as the finalists for these 4 categories in the Australian of the Year Awards made their way down the red carpet inside. We've got Local Hero being awarded tonight. We've also got the Young and Senior Australian of the Year and also the big award of the Australian of the Year. Now, the finalist from the ACT is Joanne Farrell, and she is really a champion of women and girls in the construction industry, trying to improve that gender equality in that male-dominated construction industry. Now, the finalists will be progressively announced from 7:30 tonight, and then really their names and causes will be put in the national spotlight, and they'll certainly be in excellent company. I mean, you look at past winners, people like Grace Tame, Dylan Alcott and last year's Taryn Brumfitt.
Evelyn Manfield reporting, thank you. And we'll have a full roundup of all the winners on tomorrow night's program. Russia has accused Ukraine of killing 65 of its own prisoners of war by deliberately shooting down a Russian military plane. Moscow says the captured soldiers were being flown to an exchange when the plane crashed in the southern Belgorod region near Ukraine. Kyiv says it was not told to secure safe airspace, unlike in previous swaps.
A giant fireball near the Russian city of Belgorod. Good God, this woman says. Footage posted on social media showed a plane falling from the sky.
We saw a red fiery object, then we heard an explosion and saw a red flash, and that was it.
We all ran outside in case there was any help needed. It crashed far away, but it was still loud and scary.
The remnants of a Russian military transport plane could be seen scattered across fields near the Ukrainian border. Moscow immediately accused Ukraine of shooting it down with missiles in a terrorist act and said it had been carrying 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war on their way to an exchange.
Instead of this exchange taking place, the Ukrainian side launched an anti-aircraft missile attack on this plane, which became fatal.
3 Russian officers and 6 crew members were also said to be on board. Ukraine did not confirm or deny involvement. Military intelligence said a swap had been due to take place, but that Kyiv was not told to secure its airspace for the transfer.
It's evident the Russians are playing with the lives of Ukrainian prisoners, with the feelings of their families. It's necessary to establish all clear facts, considering the plane crashed on Russian territory.
The Ukrainians are claiming one thing, the Russians are claiming another, and we just don't know enough to comment on it.
In a church near the crash site, a vigil for the Russian servicemen on board. It's unlikely Russia will allow an independent investigation, so the true circumstances of the incident may never be known. Elias Kluwer, ABC News.
Once found across Africa, northern white rhinos are now on the cusp of extinction, almost wiped out by illegal poaching. But now there's new hope for the future. Scientists have performed the first successful embryo transfer in the closely related southern species.
Adrienne and Fatou. This mother and daughter are the only two northern white rhinos left in the world. They live closely guarded on a reserve in Kenya. Now a fertility breakthrough may offer a way to save the species. Using a procedure on a closely related subspecies, scientists have successfully transferred the embryo of a southern white rhino into a surrogate mother.
It is really a great milestone to achieve the first successful embryo transfer in the rhino. It's very challenging in terms of placing an embryo inside of the reproductive tract, which is almost 2 meters inside of the animal.
The next step is to replicate this and produce northern white rhino calves. The last male died in 2018, but 30 precious embryos are being stored in a lab in Germany. Adrienne and Fatou aren't capable of carrying a calf to term, so the embryos will be implanted into a southern white rhino surrogate.
But with this new technology, we see that we have a really fair chance to achieve this, the first pregnancy of this magnificent species in this year.
It's a race against time to make the impossible possible before these northern rhinos are gone forever. Joni Jones, ABC News.
Let's hope it works. To finance now, and the local share market produced its 5th rise in a row today. Here's Alan Kohler.
The reason the share market went up again today was that the People's Bank of China cut interest rates, which boosted the iron ore price. And that led to solid gains in the share prices of Australia's listed iron ore miners, BHP, Rio Tinto and Fortescue. But there was one nasty prang. Domino's Pizza was sliced 30% after a trading update that said December half earnings would be less than last year because of falling sales in parts of Asia and Europe, especially Japan. Now, the strength of the iron ore price after that Chinese rate cut is in the context of rising commodity prices generally, caused by attacks on the shipping in the Red Sea. Iron ore is actually the commodity least affected by this, although more than 10% of the steel trade is being disrupted. But the biggest impact is on fertiliser. The US market also had its 5th rise in a row last night, and share prices in Shanghai and Hong Kong responded to the rate cut with solid gains, and the Aussie dollar was steady against all major currencies. Finally, here's a chart that explains the change to the Stage 3 tax cuts. Now, the vertical axis is percentage of income. Horizontal axis is salary, ranging up to $200,000. Now, the blue line shows how the tax cuts were going to be distributed before today's changes. The more you earned, the more you got. The orange line shows the new distribution. Now, for those on salaries above $60,000 a year, it's basically the same for all. And those earning less than $45,000 now get a tax cut where they wouldn't have before. And that's finance.
To sport now, and a late afternoon fight back from the West Indies has frustrated Australia after its bowlers delivered a dominant opening session on day 1 of the second test in Brisbane. Mitchell Starc did the damage with the ball, taking his 350th test wicket before the tourists' lower order dug in.
The West Indies won the toss and elected to bat, naming a 4th debutant for the series in the process, off-spinner Kevin Sinclair the only change from the first test for either side. There was early excitement when Josh Hazlewood thought he had Craig Braithwaite LBW, but an instantaneous review showed a huge inside edge.
Not a great start for the umpiring side of things.
But after facing 17 consecutive dot balls, Braithwaite wafted one too many outside off stump.
Hazlewood is relentless.
The paceman quick to shoo away COVID-positive all-rounder Cameron Green, who was left to celebrate by himself. Nathan Lyon was introduced in the 10th over as the run rate stalled. Tajnarine Shandapal producing some fancy footwork to avoid an embarrassing dismissal to the off-spinner. Kirk McKenzie decided to push the scoring.
There's some aggression from McKenzie.
But Pat Cummins ended his stay at the crease, gone for 21 after lashing at a wide, bouncing delivery. Shandapal had been offering some resistance, but he couldn't resist a wider one from Mitchell Stark.
Edged and taken, beautifully done.
The left armour then claiming 2 more quick wickets as he passed the 350 test dismissal mark and closed in on Dennis Lilly on the all-time list. The West Indies needed an injection of life and Joshua Da Silva tried to provide it as the tourists found some fight in the late afternoon sun. Tom Wildey, ABC News.
Meanwhile, Brisbane is celebrating after winning its second Big Bash title. Dominant performances from opening batter Josh Brown and speedster Spencer Johnson led the Heat to victory against the Sydney Sixers.
This was a moment to savour for Brisbane and its fans.
Straight down the ground, catch taken. Brisbane silence the SCG. They bring the Heat.
Brisbane had been the form setter all season and brought it home with another dominant bowling display.
It's definitely really special. The boys with the ball have been incredible all year. To defend that with ease was really special for them.
Bowled him. Has the answer as Johnson chops on.
Spencer Johnson has been a revelation for the last 2 years and his 4 wickets was rewarded, named man of the match.
I owe the Brisbane Heat everything. Coming up here last year, didn't know where my career was going and now I've just won a Big Bash with 11 of my closest mates.
So often catches win matches and how the Sixers were rude, dropping in-form opener Josh Brown on just 3. He took full advantage in a quick-fire 50.
Fielder charges in the rope, watches it fly over the head. 2 6 in a row for Brown.
No such let-offs when the Heat was in the field.
It's Nisa of all people, gets it back to Paul Walter. He's so good, Michael Nisa.
Sydney could never get its innings going, falling 54 runs short. It left Brisbane with plenty of reasons to celebrate. Job done. Matthew Smith, ABC News.
To the Australian Open, and Germany's Alexander Zverev has expressed his joy at playing his best tennis since recovering from injury. Last night, the 6th seed split the men's draw wide open, beating Spain's Carlos Alcaraz in 4 sets. His win sets up a semi-final clash against Daniil Medvedev.
Alexander Zverev had never beaten a top 5 player at a Grand Slam.
Oh, he's done it.
But his victory over world number 2 Carlos Alcaraz is one of his finest performances and comes 18 months after a painful ankle injury.
I was kind of on top of my game before the injury happened. You know, I'm obviously extremely happy to be back where I am and winning these kind of matches.
Zverev was aggressive from the outset.
And he needs the one. Wonderful display from the German.
He bludgeoned his way through the first 2 sets and was a break-up in the third before the Spaniard roared back.
You just never know.
And despite some bandaged toes, the German recovered to put the Spanish star away in 4 sets.
I'm sad with my level today because I've been playing good tennis, you know, the round before, this one with a lot of confidence.
Zverev's tournament has been overshadowed by allegations of domestic violence against a former girlfriend, claims he denies. The case is set for trial in Germany this year. Scrutiny will only grow if Zverev reaches the final. His next opponent is Daniil Medvedev.
He's obviously extremely difficult to play, there's no question about it.
An Australian is through to the men's doubles final. Matt Ebden and partner Rowan Bapana celebrated like the Special Ks after winning their semi-final in 3 sets. At 43, Bapana recently became the oldest player to reach number 1 in doubles.
I think this grey hair didn't come pretty easy, you know.
But an Australian won't feature in the women's doubles final after Storm Hunter and Katerina Siniakova lost in 3 sets. Tom Maddox, ABC News, Melbourne Park.
In the A-League women's competition, Canberra United will face Wellington Phoenix on Sunday in the team's only scheduled trip across the ditch. The teams haven't met yet this season, however their last encounter saw Phoenix win 5-0. But Wellington is winless this year, most recently going down 2-1 to Melbourne City last week. United too will be looking to bounce back after a close loss to Melbourne Victory last week, which saw them concede the deciding goal in extra time. Both sides are currently sitting outside of the top six, with United in 11th place and the Phoenix in 9th. Finals contention is within reach for both teams, with only 6 points separating Wellington and the second-placed Sydney FC.
We're only a couple of games away from being in that top six, and I think that the girls recognise that without any doubt. The players' mindset is spot on. They trained very, very hard this week, given that we've got an extra day in terms of travel and before our next game, because we play Sunday.
Athletes from the Pacific Islands are in Canberra this week going through medical assessments to determine their para classification. It's a mandatory first step towards Paralympic selection and could see the athletes represent their country at the Paris Games.
Running on Australian soil, these athletes are a long way from home.
I coach them every Thursday and Tuesday. We do a lot of trainings.
Just a few days ago, they were training on their remote Vanuatu island home, Tanna, before catching a boat to Port Vila to get their passports, flying from there to Brisbane, then on to Canberra. A big trip for an important point in their athletics career.
I'm first time in Australia. It's a big country.
These athletes, who have a range of disabilities, are going through medical testing at the AIS to determine their para-classification, a mandatory process run by volunteers that happens in Australia just once a year.
They are very rare, particularly in the Southern Hemisphere, and so we've targeted this one as the only opportunity they will have to have any chance of being in Paris.
Once classified, they will compete officially for the first time in Canberra this weekend, with their eyes set on Paralympic qualification. Training and competing helps them find respect at home, where people with a disability are sometimes marginalised.
I'm really, really, really proud of them, because those people back home, they just think they are nothing.
It's not just about the medals and the performance, it's more about what we can do around those communities, around, just inclusion, really making those communities think that every one of them, particularly these here, they're valuable members of their community.
The first step in a life-changing experience. Anthea Moody, ABC News, Canberra.
Inspiring. To the weather now, and our local weather watchers were excited by this morning's sunrise and some unusual clouds. There were lots of contributions, but tonight we're featuring this shot over Lake Burley Griffin, sent in by Scotty Imhoff. And on the southern edge of Canberra, Fiona Spire captured these remarkable clouds as seen from the Urambi Hills Nature Reserve. Thanks, Scotty and Fiona. After a low of 17 at Canberra Airport and 19 in the Valley, Canberra reached a very steamy top of 30 today. Around the capital, Narooma recorded 8 millimetres in the gauge, Thredbo 6 millimetres and Cooma 2 millimetres. Inland, Griffith reached 41 degrees and Goulburn 32. Across the country, Sydney reached a cloudy top of 32, Darwin 28, mostly sunny and 32 for Brisbane. As we heard earlier, Tropical Cyclone Kir has been upgraded to a Category 3 system as it approaches the North Queensland coast. It's expected to cross the coast near Townsville this evening, and the cyclone is forecast to move inland on Friday. Cloud with the monsoon trough and a low is also bringing heavy showers, some storms and gusty winds to northeast Western Australia and the Northern Territory's top end. Tomorrow, a possible storm and heavy falls for Darwin and 29, windy for Sydney and 38, showers and 22 for Melbourne. Around the capital, Yass Valley, partly cloudy and 28, showers for Wagga Wagga, very windy for Thredbo with a high chance of showers most likely in the morning and a top of 13. Batemans Bay, high chance of showers and 27, and there is also a marine strong wind warning for the Eden coast. After a low of 21 degrees, Canberra can expect a top of 28 and there is a medium chance of showers, most likely in the morning and afternoon. Winds will remain light. The sun will rise at 6:10 a.m. and set at 8:20 p.m. Looking ahead, partly cloudy conditions are forecast to begin from Saturday with 28 degrees the top that day, Sunday 29, Monday 31, and then the chance of showers on Tuesday and 33, down to 29 on Wednesday. And that's the very latest from the Canberra newsroom. I'm Adrienne Francis. Great to be with you. Stay with us now for the Australian of the Year Awards, live from the National Arboretum. Enjoy your evening. Yarra, good night.